Hello, everybody. My name is Alan Singer. I'm a professor of secondary education at Hofstra University on Long Island. I'm a former high school and middle school teacher. There's been a lot of concern about edTPA and what does an edTPA video and an edTPA lesson and an edTPA lesson plan look like. And what we're going to do today with some volunteers from my Hofstra Social Studies Methods class is going to have an edTPA lesson. And I'm going to take you through a lesson plan and all the different pieces that you want to include in the video. We have some of the students who have volunteered to be our target students because I have a high-performing student at each table and I have a student with special needs at each table. No, they're not really. But that's how I've set it up, and we've set up the camera to focus on that group of students. Sometimes I'm going to be on camera, sometimes I'm going to be off camera. But the goal is going to be to involve students as much as possible in discussion and work. After we're done, members of the class will join in a discussion of evaluating. We're going to be doing 2 lessons, or evaluating the lessons, and also figuring out how you might crop it for your 2 10-minute segments. Clearly, this is not part of the 2 10-minute segments. This is the introduction. All right. Our aim for today, what were conditions like for Irish immigrants to North America in the era before the Civil War? We're going to be looking at 2 lessons. And the lesson plan is aimed for a 7th grade class. We're going to be looking basically at the 1830s, 1840s. But you could adapt the lesson for a high school class, 11th grade. What you'll find is that the reading materials that you're going to use are going to depend on the reading level of your class and of your students. I was involved in designing the New York State Great Irish Famine curriculum. And we had reading materials which we called upper elementary, middle school, high school. And when teachers raised with us, some high school teachers said, you know, they're using the middle level because that's what their students read. And I had middle school classes that were using the high school level because that's what their students read. And these are adjustments, these are decisions that teachers make as they work with live students in their classes. I'm going to give out a handout. Normally, I would distribute it at the door as students came in, but we're already seated. So we're going to make believe everybody's coming in the door and everybody is getting their handout for their due now. And I'll greet the students and hi everybody, how are you? How is your day going? Great hat today. Just a chat up that you give students when they come in class. Okay. When they come in, copy down your aim question, copy your homework assignment. Your homework assignment for tonight is to interview at least 1 family member, but ideally as many as 3, to learn whether they think immigration to the United States was more difficult in the past or the present. I want them to write a 250-word response on their interviews. That's tonight's homework. Okay, that's tonight's homework, but it's also posted on our website. If you don't get a chance to copy it down, you can get it later. Our do now. Dan, could you just read the do now for us?
This cartoon was by created Joseph Kepler from the magazine Puck. It was published in 1893, but also represents attitudes towards immigration in the early years. Examine the cartoon and answer questions 1 through 4.
Okay, so we have this cartoon. We're going to go over the questions just to make sure that everybody is on the same page. Melissa, would you read the questions for us?
Sure. 1. Describe the 5 people in the background. What are they doing to the recently arrived immigrant? 2. What do the shadows behind these 5 people represent? 3. In your opinion, what is the point of view of the cartoonist about immigration? Explain your answer referring to specific information in the cartoon. And 4. What is a good title for this cartoon?
That's the hard one. So I'm gonna come around while people are working, and let's see if I can give help. But before we begin to do now, does anybody have a question about what you're supposed to do. All right, let's get started. Now, I'm going to circulate around the room, and while I circulate, I carry a pad and a pen, because one of the things I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking notes on what students are doing. That will help me with my informal assessment of student work, but that will also help me identify students who have particularly good answers that I want to address. Now, given time for our video, what I'd like people to concentrate is that last one. Because what we're going to do is I want to get multiple answers on that last choice. Now, I have other students in the class, so sometimes I'm going to be off camera because I have to provide support for all the students in my class, even those who are not going to be on camera now. How's it going? Any questions? Okay, there you go. How are we doing? You have a good title for us? Come on, Carla, you have a good title. Huh? Ah, all right. Our student over here is not sure where the shadows are, so she's kind of stumped. Anybody can help Brooke with the shadows? Alex?
The shadows are probably the, I guess like the ancestors of these people who are in charge now, so those were the earlier immigrants.
I like a good answer. Any other suggestions who the shadows might be? Yeah? Gabby?
Behind, because the shadows are behind these wealthy men, it could be like these wealthy men have like made their money off of the backs of immigrants.
Ooh, so one possibility is their ancestors. Another, those are people they exploited. Any other hypotheses about who these shadows are?
The shadows could represent their past.
Say again?
The shadows could represent their past and who they once were before they became rich.
Why do you think the shadows might represent their past?
Because the shadows are showing workers, like peddlers and possibly chimney sweeps, and now they're in front of them and they're wearing rich clothing and they look upper class. It's about immigration, so.
Right. We have three possible answers now. Steve?
I kind of agree that, I mean, you cast a shadow. The darker half of you, that's hard to see, and that's what they're hiding. Could be possibly what they're hiding, that they were immigrants themselves.
William, what do you think? You agree with Steve? You agree with Zach?
I agree with Zach the most because they look very similar to that same immigrant that's coming off the boat, and so it looks like they worked their way up and now they don't want the same person they are coming in.
All right. Those are very good answers. And I think you can interpret it multiple ways. So based on your interpretation, see what kind of title you can come up with. We got 2 minutes because we're going to move on to our next piece. So let's get to work on our title. Was that helpful, Brooke?
Very helpful, yeah.
All right, we have a good class here. That's right. All right, Zach already has his title. All right, Zach. I'm jotting down in my pad, so I remember that I want to call it. Zach has a very good title there. All right, we're going to, Brian. Nice, Brian. Good work. Because I'm reinforcing people so they should feel that they have a good choice, that they didn't just do something inappropriate. Ooh, you got that from a book. Again, you see there are multiple titles here. All right, let's take a look at what we have. I'm going to move off center because I want the people I call on to speak to the full class. Carla, what did you suggest as a title?
I wrote Forgotten Past.
Why did you make that choice?
Because I kind of agree with Gabby, what she was saying, that they kind of like, it's either people they've exploited but most likely maybe it could be their ancestors, but they kind of forgot where they're coming from and their roots, and they're in a way denying it by pushing these new immigrants out. So they've forgotten their past.
Very nice. But you had something similar, but with a little bit of a twist.
I said it was ghosts of immigrants past, and it was just the idea that they more or less kind of forgotten where they came from, and that it was, I think it was their ancestors that were immigrants, and they've made money off of their family being able to move up, and they're forgetting where they came from.
And what Dickens book novel did you get this title from?
It just reminded me of the Ghosts of Christmas Past.
It reminded me of the same. I wonder who came up with the idea, Dickens or Kepler first.
I had the same time.
Very good, very good. Let's see, we got Doug, I got Zach, what did you come up with?
Don't forget where you come from.
Because that supports your idea
Yeah, I agree with Doug as well.
that they forgot.
Yeah.
Okay, what we're going to do now is I want to transition a bit. And I'd like to talk a bit about the problems faced by immigrants in the past and in the present. Some of you may live in communities where there's been tension around immigration, or you've been following the presidential election, and there's been a lot of tension around immigration. So what I'd like to know is if you think immigration was more difficult in the past, or is more difficult in the present? Is it more difficult in that time, 1890s and earlier, or is it more difficult now to be an immigrant? Doug?
I think in the past it might have been more difficult, specifically in the case of the Irish. I know there was a lot of discrimination against the Irish. There were signs in windows, Irish don't need to apply, people were chased down the streets, whereas now there are populations of people who are against immigration and workers taking work, but a lot of people are very eager to actually take advantage of the cheap workforce. So I think that's one difference that we see.
Anyone else?
I kind of
Cecilia?
think that it isn't really more difficult for either, it's just difficult for everyone. And I think that every time a new group of immigrants comes here, there's always discrimination against them. And I think that as humans, it's easy to hate someone when you've felt hate. So if there's someone new who comes, you no longer have to be that person who's discriminated, you can discriminate the next person. So I think it has always been an issue and kind of continues to go that way.
Is there anyone who thinks it's more difficult today? Daddy?
Well, I think it might be more difficult today just to be an immigrant, like to be able to come into this country. It's a lot harder than it used to be because now you need visas and you can try to cross illegally, but you know, your life is different if you do.
You know, I mean, what you're saying is today there's a lot of issues with legal versus illegal immigration. Do you think that makes it more difficult?
I don't know, because in the past, like, I agree with what Doug said, but you know, the Irish, it's like they had signs in the windows that no Irish need apply, and then nowadays they're willing to pay for cheap labor because it's cheaper labor. So they're willing to pay immigrants that because they don't want to pay more. So I feel like it's hard today, but it's also was hard back then.
You haven't spoken, Michelle. You think it's harder today, harder back then?
Well, I mean, I guess it might be a little easier today just because we have like better transportation. Because when you think about people coming from Ireland in the 1890s, they had to like take a boat and it probably took a really long time. Now people can just get on a plane and like that alone makes it easier and safer and faster. And now I mean you can like apply for a visa online. Like technology makes that like much more accessible.
Marissa, what do you think?
I think it's not necessarily more or less different. I mean, difficult. I think there's challenges that the earlier waves of immigrants faced that are a non-issue now, and I think there's ones now that
were a non-issue back then, so I think it's not necessarily a difference in difficulty, it's just different entirely because the global climate's changed and our domestic climate has changed.
Brian?
I think it depends on the time period. In the past, there wasn't as much immigration laws that restricted people from coming here. In the 50s, there were more immigration laws that restricted more people. But today, there are more immigration laws, but technology has made it, for people who are able to come here, technology has made it a lot easier to stay in contact with home, to come here a lot easier, to visit home a lot easier. And that's what I think.
I just want to time out for a second, just so people watching our edTPA video. What we've been able to do by looking at the past and present is we've been able to engage a number of people in cross discussion with people addressing what other people who have already spoken have said. And that is one of our major goals, to stimulate that kind of interaction between students in a class. We're now going to transition to the next part of this first lesson. So in the transition, my question is going to be, well, we've looked at this cartoon, we've talked a little bit about problems faced by immigrants today. I think the points people made were very, very strong points. What I'd like to do is take a look at a primary source document about the Irish experience in the 1840s and see what we can understand about the Irish experience then based on this primary source document. At the bottom of the page are 6 questions. Take a look at the questions first, and then we'll see if people have questions about the questions. While I get to my next piece here, my next slide. Now, I don't know if the technology is going to work, but we will try. Matt, any questions about the questions? All right, let's take a look. Questions about the questions? Okay. After you look at the questions, the lyrics to this song are on the back of the sheet. What I want you to do is read over the lyrics, and then we will answer the questions together. Now you'll notice there's a word bank at the top, and some of the words that are in the passage are defined. Let's take a look at the word bank, because that will help us. Our friend in the song is wearing corduroy breeches. Does anybody know what corduroy breeches are? You're laughing. Why?
You're wearing them.
Yes, these are corduroy breeches for those of you who didn't know. In that day, they were working man's pants. They were tougher than simple cotton cloth. So working men would wear corduroy breeches. Another word in our word bank is filamioriore. I know you all know that from context, right? Jamie, you know what filamioriore means? No! Erica, do you know what filamioriore means?
It's a nonsense word that gives the song spirit.
Yes, doesn't mean anything. It's just silly. That's why you didn't know it, Jamie, because it doesn't mean anything. He has bad cess. Bad cess. That's just an old Irish term. Cess is luck. He has bad luck. And it says he doesn't have a stocking or cravat. He doesn't have a stocking, which is and he doesn't have a cravat, a scarf or a tie. So these are some of the words here. Now, in real life, it would spend some time reading over the song individually, but we don't have the time. We're going to pretend everybody read it, answered the questions. I went around, I took notes. And then William said, how does the song really go? And I said, thanks, William. Let's take a listen to the song. This is our multiple entry points to the song. And I hope, let's see, how do you want this to open? I'm going to try Chrome. Okay. And I need volume.
New bad sister luck that brought me through the work upon the rail. I left the old world for the new bad sister luck that brought me through the work upon the
What instrument is he playing?
Banjo.
It's this banjo, yeah. This will kind of help us understand the lyrics of the song.
In 1843, 'twas then I met
Sweet Biddy McGee, and now look at the wife she made for me. Oh, come on, everybody. Oh, follow me, oh, come on. Here's
in
the
1845.
I found myself more dead than alive. Found myself more dead than alive. I'm working on the red one. Fill me, Ori, hey. Fill me, Ori. Oh, fill me, Ori. Oh, working on the railway. What year is it now?
In 1847, sweet Biddy McGee.
Gee, she went to heaven.
If she left one kid, she left 11.
How many kids? 11. Oh, Ori. Oh, fill me, Ori, hey. Oh, fill me, Ori. I'm working on the railway. Not bad. Okay, I'm going to pause out P, and we'll get back to the song. A couple of things about the song that I think we have to draw our attention to better understand. Michelle, could you read question number 1?
In stanza 1, why does Patty put on corduroy boots?
What do you think, Michelle?
Because he's going to work on the railroad.
Yeah. He's going to do day labor. He needs his rough pants. Carl, you did your question 2.
In stanza 5, why is Patty more dead than alive?
Okay, read stanza 5 for us.
In 1845, I found myself more dead than alive. I found myself more dead than alive from working on the railroad.
So we need to hypothesize here. Why do you think he finds himself more dead than alive?
Because he's been laboring on the railroad for many years.
And what does that suggest about laboring on the railroad?
Sorry?
What does it suggest about laboring on the railroad?
But it's hard, strenuous work
I'll kill you.
that will kill you eventually.
All right, I like that answer, Carly. Thank you. Mike, would you read question number 3 for us?
Why would someone attack Patty in stanza 6 with sticks and stones?
Read stanza 6 for us.
In 1846, they pelted me with stones and sticks, and I was in one hell of a fix from working on the railroad.
Mike,
Killing me, yeah.
why do you think they pelted him with stones and sticks? Why would anybody pelt him with stones and sticks? Mike in the man, go on.
Maybe they were striking or something like that.
What do you mean?
On the railroad, they were so fed up with their conditions that they decided to do something about it, and the authorities came in and did what the authorities did back then.
I like that. Matt, what about you?
I was thinking more of anti-Irish sentiments.
What do you mean?
People are angry that they're taking their jobs.
That's a good prospect. Anybody else have a way that they see this? Yeah, Brian?
Maybe it was resting and they were just trying to get him back to work.
Just a mean boss.
Yeah.
So we have 3 different possible explanations. The reality is it's hard to know, unless we know some more about the historical background here. Melissa,
Yes.
why don't you read the next question for us?
Okay. What happened to Patty, Biddy, and their children? Okay, in 1847, Sweet Biddy, she died and went to heaven. If she left one child, she left 11 to work upon the railway.
Now, what year were they married?
You were there?
What year did he meet his elegant wife, Sweet Biddy? Matt?
1842.
So, and then what year did she die? And how many kids does she have? How many years is that? And how many kids does she have?
11.
I don't know about you, but that's, I find it a little bit, what's going on here? What would we call that claim? Hyperbole. What would be like an English word for hyperbole that we might actually know what it means? Because you're an all-star. Yes?
Exaggeration.
You think he's exaggerating?
I'm not sure.
But it concerns me, because if he's exaggerating about that, what else may he be doing? That's a problem. Because here we are, looking at this song as a possible historic source. And now we catch him in an exaggeration. Dan, do you think we can rely on this as a valid historical source?
I think so. I mean, I think you can't take it for its literal sense, but you can analyze it and take away parts where it says that it's hard work in the railroad.
Mr. Novak, do you think we can rely on this as a valid historical source?
I would say so, because it reflects some of the times, like he's wearing corduroy breeches and he's got his hat and he's talking about working on the railroad. So specifics might not be accurate completely.
You can, you just need to back it up with other resources to see if it adds up and it makes sense.
Wait, explain that again?
You should always use more than one source to see if it's reliable, what you're using.
What do you think of Melissa's idea, Brooke?
That it sounds what?
What do you think?
Yeah.
So this is what I'd like you to do now. Working with your partners, I would like you to make a list of 5 additional sources you would like to see that would help either support or contradict the points made by Patty in this song. So work with your pairs, make a list of 5. We're going to put the list on the board, and we will evaluate the choices that you're suggesting. I'm going to come around. I'm going to
Definitely know the songs of the era. I know the Irish songs of the era. I think what else do they have back then? Articles, magazines, pictures? Are they wearing breeches? You know what I mean? Like, what are they wearing right there in that picture right there? Right? I mean, listen, we all know it was hard work. We know it was the Irish and the Chinese that built it for the most part. We know they were discriminated against. I mean, those things are all proven true. I don't get another source document. Tell me that. Yeah, definitely diary. Absolutely diaries, because you know a lot of them were working, they were alone, they kept a diary, they kept a journal. Like I said, hopefully pictures, you have pictures like that.
That's totally reasonable.
Irish songs.
We also switched look for sources.
Absolutely, if it's still around, you can do that, you can track it.
All right, are we ready? All right, everybody, I saw a lot of very good things. Let's get, I need everybody's attention, because what we're going to do is we're going to make a list here of the sources that people are recommending. And then we will evaluate them together, which ones we think are the best sources. Chrissy Ann, what do you have?
All of them are just.
Give me all.
Okay, so I had newspaper articles.
Wait, I have to go to the right. Okay?
Diary entries of the workers. Letters home. Photos from the time. Other Irish songs. So if the other songs agree with it, then. And then the last one we had was train company records.
Before we evaluate these, does anybody have other sources? Yes, ma'am.
We came up with, like, going in line with company records, also like immigration records, birth records, death records.
You have to go slower.
Just like other public records, so like economic records, birth and death records, and immigration records.
Why did you focus on the birth and death records?
Because I think it would show, you know, if a family had, also economic records, because if a family had a ton of kids and they were making very little money, it would kind of show what they were living with.
Other sources? Yes, Doug?
You said political cartoons from the time.
Ooh, why? Well, we're gonna get.
And then we also said first-hand accounts from workers.
Any, yes, Zach?
We have paintings.
You can get a map of the railroad and it's like the mileage,
Ooh.
trains, stops.
Any, yes?
This class was 100 years ago, maybe you could ask one of them.
Interviews. Hard, but. Any others? Mike?
What about nonfiction books or historical books?
Very
That's a
good.
secondhand source. It's not. Those are all contemporary, so that's.
Okay, contemporary books. I'm gonna have to swing here. You came up with more than I thought. Cecilia? We'll put that in songs and poems. So we have 15 really good ideas. Does anybody have any questions or skepticism about some of these sources? That maybe they would not be available?
Well, if people came here illegally, they wouldn't have any immigration record. They would just, so the only one for those would really be the death records, if at all.
Where might we find birth and death records if they're not kept by government, however?
Church.
Yes, that's very good. Patty marries Biddy, and if they marry in a Roman Catholic church, which was likely, you may be able to find church records. So I think that's important. We have public records. We also have church records. They may be very good sources from that period of time. What does anybody else have other questions about this? Any of these sources? So we know one of the sources would be a problem in the 1840s.
Well, I was going to say that the newspaper also could be biased against immigrants.
Well, that's very good. But why finding bias accounts? Why might that be helpful?
To understand why he was beaten sticks and stones.
Yeah.
Very good. Yes. Now, I think, Carla, you made a good point about the newspaper accounts. What else could the newspaper accounts help us with? About the sticks and stones, what do we want to find out?
If there are any strikes.
You know, the newspapers might actually carry that information. Now, what's interesting, the New York Times is online back to 1851. We might be able to look back at some of the early sources. Brooklyn Eagle is online even earlier. So we might actually have some accessibility to some of this information.
What about hoppers? How long have they been around?
1852, yes. Now, but there is couple of sources that might be problems.
Maybe the company record, because they might like try to cover up some unfavorable things that they may have
May not even be in business anymore.
Another, yeah, good point, Steve. Another possible problem in one of these sources.
Photograph,
Why would photographs be a problem?
Civil War, I think, that's one of the photographs.
Exactly. Photography is primitive at that point. The first real photographs are going to be from the 1860s Civil War era. It's not likely we're going to get photographs that old, though you might have photographs from Irish workers getting started in 1860s and 70s.
Paintings, I think, too, are kind of iffy because there's images that, everybody takes as truth, but if it's a painting, we have no real way of knowing if that's accurate unless we have the photograph to back it up.
We have 5 minutes left in this lesson, so this is what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to complete your exit ticket on the bottom of the sheet. What form or forms of documentary evidence do you believe will provide the best evidence about Irish immigrant experience in the United States? I want you to pick the one that you think, and I want you to explain why, and then you'll be sharing them with the group. Fix your glasses, eh? How's it going, Kyle? Excellent. Newspapers, journal entries. Journals. Diaries. Letters. Okay, we need to get finished up right now. What I would like to do tomorrow is see if I can put together a package with some of the documentary evidence that you're asking for, and we can use that documentary evidence to help us to evaluate the Irish experience. So, Kyle, let's start with you. What kind of documentary evidence do you particularly like?
The newspaper.
Why?
Because I thought that it would have the most reliable info and that it could reflect difficulties of the workers or like how people felt about immigrants.
I like that idea. Brooke, what about you?
I also said news articles. I wrote that there are like sources that are written about what happened, so, and they're sent out to the public, so they have to be relatively accurate.
William?
I said the best is a diary because someone wouldn't have any reason to lie to themselves.
Good point. Zach?
I basically said the same as William, that they're writing about their own personal accounts and they have no reason to alter any experience because it's for themselves.
What would you like to see, Marty?
Diaries and or letters home, because I think that's the most heartfelt, and to try to get a real sense of the personal experience, those are good sources.
People, classmates, I think this was a really good exploration. So what I'm going to try to do for tomorrow is assemble a package that will help us begin to look at primary sources to better understand the Irish experience in America. That completes lesson number 1. Just as feedback for our studio audience. Anybody want to comment on what we did? Steve?
I just want to comment on the letters. I like the letters, but also if you're writing a letter home, you might lie to your mom, your dad, whoever, say, yeah, everything's great, don't worry about it. That's why I kind of like the diary entries, because you're not really gonna lie to yourself. But you can lie in the letter, just to try to, I mean, listen, people are worried about you, you picked up, you left, you're 1,000 miles away. Maybe you're gonna lie in that letter.
Gary?
No, I was gonna say, well, Steve had mentioned the diary, and I was gonna say, well, but the diary, you usually won't lie to yourself. But I agree, yeah, like, if I'm having a terrible time, I'm telling my mom that it was a good time, so that she's not like,
You don't want her to worry, I'm home now.
Yeah.
What do you think of the format of the lesson, what we did in the lesson?
I liked with the do now, I'm a visual learner, so I enjoyed the pictures, and also I thought the song was funny and creative, a bit exaggerated in the 11 kids. But yeah, I liked the way that the lesson was fun.
Alex, what do you think? What do you think of what we did? What were some of the things you thought were strong, some of the things you thought couldn't have done better?
I liked the discussion overall. I didn't like the song, so I would change that.
That's okay. Everybody's not gonna like the same thing. Right? Wait.
I liked the discussion, but I liked the song, how we concluded that it might not be a legitimate piece of evidence. So it really has us wondering if the whole class is accurate or not.
Nice. Marissa?
I liked how, basically, in theory, if this were a class of students, they would feel like they formed tomorrow's lesson. So it's kind of like give the people what they want sort of deal, so they would feel like, hey, he's, working for us, like to help us. So I think it kind of gives them a little bit of a
ownership.
Yeah.
Chrissy?
I like it overall, just with the song, the one that you played, it skipped stanzas, and that bothered me a lot. I like to read, I was trying to read along with, wait a minute, okay, 43, okay, and then I'm like, wait, we're in 45, now we're in 40, just the skip it like that, I got hung up on that.
It's funny. You won't believe this, but I have the original version of the song on plastic. We don't have a record player anymore. So I had to go with what I could find on YouTube. What might make sense, it's a good point, is adjusting the activity sheet to correspond to the years he's singing. I think that's a very good suggestion. So in my assessment of a lesson, I could say the misalignment confused some students, and in the future I'd have to make sure they're better aligned.
Are we talking about two things that could have been, that were
Yeah.
The one thing that I, as learning it, felt off about was that both things we went over were kind of subjective. It was a lot of what do you think this means? Whereas I don't feel like I came away with a heavy understanding of what actually happened. So now, as much as I am looking forward to tomorrow to find out what the truth is, I kind of left today not knowing still what the truth is.
Uncertain. All right, well then we're going to have to move to tomorrow right away because Doug wants to know. Inquiring minds want to know. So we're going to have to move on to tomorrow. Aim 2. Again, what were conditions like for Irish immigrants to America and the years of the Civil War? Tonight's homework is going to be a reading passage, and you have to answer 3 questions based on the reading passage. So again, it will be posted on the class website, so we're going to move right in to our do now. And here's our do now. It's another political cartoon. Mike, why don't you just read the do now instructions and the questions.
Okay, this cartoon was created by Thomas Nast for Harper's Magazine. It was published in 1867. Examine the cartoon and answer questions 1 through 4. Is the source. And the questions, first question is, what is the caption of this cartoon? Second question is, what is happening in the cartoon? Third is, how are the Irish portrayed in the cartoon? And fourth and last is, in your opinion, what cartoonist Thomas Nast was a nativist biased against immigrants?
Well, nativist is going to be one of our academic vocabulary words. We may also decide bias has to be an academic vocabulary word. That depends on our class and whether we've looked at that word in the past, in other contexts. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to look at the cartoon. Here we have the cartoon on the front board as well. Jamie, what is the caption of the cartoon? Can you make it out? Huh?
I'm trying to get to the one on the board. I can only make out a couple of the words on the bottom.
How about the big words?
The day we celebrate.
And what is the day we celebrate?
I can't really.
St. Patrick's.
St. Patrick's Day.
Now, what is St. Patrick's Day? St. Patrick's Day. Gabby?
It's a celebration of St. Patrick who drove the snakes out of Ireland.
And who is this St. Patrick? What is his official title in Ireland? Diane?
It's the patron saint of the Irish.
All right. So here we have the Irish are celebrating the patron saint. But what does the cartoon show about this event? What's going on here?
It looks like there's like a riot or something going on.
And you'll notice in the lower left-hand corner, what are they blaming for the riot? Which is, what are they saying about the Irish celebrants? Yeah, they're drunk, and what does that lead to? And? All right. Now, if you look at the cartoon, look at the faces of the Irish. How does Thomas Nast portray the Irish in this cartoon? Brooke?
Badly.
It's more than badly, Brooke. Look at those faces. What do they look like?
They're like savages.
Steve?
Yeah, cavemen, apes, gorillas.
I mean, do you know any people who are Irish?
I know a lot.
Do they look like that?
Absolutely not.
Brooke,
Not
do you
even
know any people
drunk.
Irish?
I know a few, yeah.
Do they look like that?
No.
So what does that suggest about Thomas Nast?
Native. Yeah, nativist doesn't like the Irish.
What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be looking at a package of documents based on your requests yesterday, so Doug can have a better sense of what really happened. I did this just for Doug, other people could participate. So now what we have, let's go over the instructions. It's a team activity. Michelle, could you just read the instructions for a team activity?
Sure. Each student pair will read about the experience of Irish immigrants to the United States in a different locality and answer the accompanying questions. Pairs will then help their teams complete the document chart. Be prepared to report on your sections before class.
Okay, so I'm going to assign people. So we have Brian and William. You're a pair. Now, Brian and William are really strong students. I'm going to assign them document A, so that's the hardest of the documents. Carla and Gabby, you're going to be doing document B. Frank and Cecilia, you're going to be doing document 3. Doug and Michelle, they are troubled readers. They're in my assessments. So I'm going to be giving them document 4, the Irish arrived in New Brunswick, Canada, because that's a little bit easier to read. The thing is, we're going to then shift positions, so one of you is going to come to this table, one of you is going to come to this table, so that as a team, we're going to be able to complete the chart. The chart that we're completing is on the back page. And what you're going to have to do is identify what year, what were the conditions faced by the Irish, and if there's any evidence in this passage of natives. So let's get to work and we look through the package. We're not going through the whole activity. But again, it's a pair share. You're doing 4, you're doing 3, you're doing 2, you're doing 1, and everybody in the class is paired up to do one of the documents. Take a quick look. I'm going to advance this. Notice I have the grid on the smart board. If I wasn't technologically inept, we would actually fill it out on the smart board. I'd have the students come up and fill it on the smart board. But the problem here is I'm not as smart as the smart board, so we're not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to duplicate it On the regular board, for the technologically challenged,
Yeah, it doesn't work. I keep saying the same thing every year. Can we fix this one part this year? Come Thanksgiving, can we fix this one? Can we fix this one? Can we fix this one?
Yeah. Where are you at?
now I'm going to sit down and work with my target students, provide them with the special support that they need, because that is one of the demands on me as a teacher. So I'm going to sit with them and just talk with them for a minute. After this team has the most difficult of the primary sources, I'm going to stop and I'm going to work with them for a couple of minutes. Other words that you don't understand, or the phrases or things that are puzzling you, or you having difficulty. Some of the language in this piece is colloquial, and it's dated. So they're asking me language questions, and I will help them figure it out, because they have the more difficult text, but they're grappling with it, trying to figure out the terms from context. That's important, because those are some of the Common Core demands, that things that they will have to do on the ELA exam.
Do you always set it up that way? Always put the hardest first?
No, you vary. And sometimes I don't, every lesson doesn't have different levels of text, lexile levels. Some lessons, you can't do it for every lesson. But this lesson I set up that way.
Now, like in theory, did you, if you were actually teaching this figure to kids, would you have had this packet set up already and you just kind of knew that they would get there?
Okay, that's a very good question. The answer is yes. Sometimes I will then look for other things, but the reality is I had the package set up in advance. Obviously, we went straight through. And the reason is, those pretty much, people come up with the same documents all the time. Yeah, let's just look at where these 4 sources are, all right? The New Orleans source, what is that from? Take a look, Erica, what's that New Orleans, what is it, where is it from?
It's a report by Tyrone Powers.
Okay, and what did he do?
He was an actor who toured the South.
Yeah, and he wrote about what he witnessed. The second source, let's just take a quick flip to the second source. You were reading the second source. Where is that from? Well, okay, what's the year for New York?
Well, they're saying it's between 1838 and 1857.
And what is it?
It's passages from the diary.
Yeah. Now, but he's not an Irish immigrant. What is he? He's American. He's Anglo. And he's also, based on the passages, what do you notice about how? Speak to them.
He's a nativist.
So we have a Irishman touring the South, describing what he sees. We have an American nativist who wrote a diary about the Irish experience. Cecilia, you have number 3. What is this?
This one is talking about anti-Irish riots in Philadelphia in 1884.
And this is a report on the Irish riot, on the anti-Irish riot. And Doug, what do we have at number 4?
It's a letter back home.
All right. Now this is interesting because people were worried. Gabby particularly was worried. You know, that people were going to lie in the letter.
They
What-
lied.
What are they saying in this letter?
Don't come.
Why not?
Because everybody's dying.
Yeah, so it's not a come here quick letter. Now, people at home are expecting them to send money. What is he saying?
Send him some money.
You know, why not?
Because he's only making $1 a day.
So it's actually a very accurate description of what conditions are. So working together, students would come up and they'd finish their piece. They'd fill in the year, the conditions, and any evidence of nativism that they saw. And now we come to the last piece of the lesson. So this is going to be a lot of time reading and writing. The last piece is our exit ticket. And in our exit ticket for this lesson, back to our activity sheet, and Christiane, you just read what the exit ticket is.
Do you believe it was harder for immigrants to the United States in the era before the Civil War today? Explain.
Fine. Very simple. We've been talking about this for 2 days. But in your answer, you need to cite specific evidence from the text. Students write their answers. I'm going to circulate around the room, and then I'm going to call on people to read, and we will have our discussion. What we have are 2 lessons where students are analyzing cartoons, analyzing a song, analyzing text written on different levels, and constantly reporting back and discussing. These becomes 2 out of 3 edTPA video lessons. Now, the next lesson on our lesson plan explains where we go next. I want to give out the lesson plan, and we can take a look at the plan itself to see how the lesson plan corresponded to what we actually did. 2. Or I'll just pass some that way, pass some that way, and I'm going to sit over here, and let's take a look at the plan. Again, it starts off, this is 7th grade. This goes in the unit on sectionalism and development of the northern states. So we're probably, we're looking at March, in the 7th grade calendar. Topic, Irish immigrants in the United States, and our aim question is, what were conditions like for Irish immigrants to North America in the era before the Civil War? I called the era before the Civil War to help place it in historical context. I also put down North America because we're going to be, one of the letters is from where?
Canada.
All right, we have our scaffolding. We have our main ideas, central focus, our common core ideas. The framework comes straight from the state. The common core comes from the state, though what I try to do is to make it lesson specific. I have my academic vocabulary, analyze, valid, nativist, historical sources, my list of materials. The do now for both lessons is going to be describing the cartoon, the motivation for the lessons, the activities, how I'm going to differentiate instruction, compelling or higher order questions, which are also the questions in the activities, how I'm assessing student learning as we go, how will I bring the lessons to closure, classroom applications, maybe current events, some enrichment activities, homework assignments. Previous lesson was a generic lesson on immigration to North America, looking at charts and graphs, also looking at push and pull. And the day after is going to be on the expansion of industry now that they have all these new workers. So what we have are a series of lessons, 2 in the middle, which helps students to understand. What do you think? You did edTPA.
Yes.
What do you think of this as an approach?
This makes it so much easier than when I did it.
Why?
You provided an example for us. I mean, we were given an example at St. John's that was kind of completely different. Like, we didn't get this, like, you are lucky. He just gave you an example of how to do an edTPA lesson. I didn't have that. We did a practice edTPA in our class, so like, there were 5 of us in a classroom, and we each had to do our own like mini lesson and do a practice one, and we had to like even record ourselves doing it. But it's different because your peers, sometimes, especially there's only 5 of you in a classroom, they're not going to respond, so you don't know how it's going to work in a real classroom until you're actually doing it. So this really gives you an idea of how to do it, and you know what to expect and how to answer these questions.
Now, you've all been doing your intense work in classroom. How does this compare to something you've been doing in classroom, Paul?
It's very similar, obviously with the difference that you have a rough estimate of what you to expect, given that in this class. So if you're gonna do it like with actual middle schoolers, you don't know what they're gonna say. Or they wouldn't have a background knowledge like we do, because we already went to middle school, high school. So we would answer the way you would think we should answer.
Well, that's a fair point. Again, one of the goals, again, this is a lesson in March. So by that time, in theory, it gives you a chance to know the students and know what they can do, know who needs help, who doesn't, who works well alone, who works well in groups. So the goal, and I think Carla's point is very important, you don't want to do your edTPA without knowing your students. Doug, did you want to?
No, Alan, it's gonna sound like a stupid question, but I'm sure I'm not the only one. What does actually TPA stand for? I've asked 4 people and they didn't know.
Teacher Professional Assessment.
Okay.
And again, one of the reasons this is concerned is this edTPA is aligned with Danielson, which is one of the assessments that are used for working teachers. And this could end up being a pilot for working teachers. edTPA was originally designed for review when teachers applied for tenure. It was not designed for student teachers. That was an afterthought, because to do it with working teachers, you would need consent from the unions, and they weren't giving it. So they dumped it on you, and then they made you pay for it too.
Great.
Other thoughts or questions? Yeah.
You said you were going to put this online?
Yes.
And send out the link?
What we'll do is when it's complete, we'll edit, we'll post it so that people can consult it as they work on their TPA portfolios. And also the lesson plan will be posted, so you can look at the lesson plan, compare with the video.
Can you explain classroom application?
Yes, okay, that's very good. One of the problems in a lesson is lessons run short sometimes. And you need, what am I going to do? You know, I thought this lesson was going to take 45 minutes, and it took 40. It took 30. And I don't want to waste my students' time. Now, Frank, when you're teaching, what do you do when you run short?
I try to then use the rest of the time in class as like maybe to throw out like a discussion about the lesson, and even if they could relate it to something that they've been doing to make it a little more interesting. It's happened to me before, so.
It happens all the time.
When I was student teaching, I was teaching the history of voting. And earlier that morning, I'd actually been looking like through the news to see whatever, and I found this article about Alabama suppressing voting rights. So I actually, I had more time left after they did the exit ticket, so I kind of posed a question to them, like, well, what do you think about this? Okay. And then I'm like, what if I told you it's actually happening? And that kind of led the discussion until they left the class.
Current events, a very good application to reinforce the ideas. We could pull up a headline on problems faced by immigrants today, the debate over putting a wall up in Mexico, and say, we've been looking at the problems the Irish face. Well, these issues haven't gone away. And put up a political cartoon on the idea of building a wall in Mexico and say, look, what do you think what's being argued here. What do you think about the issues at this point?
Well, I just had a question about, just for the sake of edTPA, is it, I guess, like, you have the same type of do now one day after the other. Should you try and make it, like, switch it up a bit, or does it not really matter?
You can always change that.
Yeah.
When I was doing taught the 10th grade, the cooperating teacher, they were doing French Revolution, and they started off with like a little mini script, like a little play.
Oh, no, I
So,
mean,
like,
obviously within the whole scope of your
Yeah.
teaching, I mean, for the days you film, like, is
Yeah.
it?
The
are
rest
they
of the
gonna-
lessons are very different.
Okay.
So, now, but again, we're not submitting the full 135 minutes of our edTPA. I mean, if you think about it, where in these lessons do you think points that might be useful for your two 10-minute clips? Let's say we take it from these two lessons. What parts of the lessons might be useful? Cecilia?
Probably parts where the whole class was involved and discussing.
Again, good people, there's interaction going on. I think that's a good suggestion. What else?
To say when you were asking people for ideas on historical context.
Because that requires students to reach judgments and support them. Good. Other points in the lessons.
I would do when you were asking us for different sources we wanted to use, and then do one the next day where you're either presenting those sources or they're looking at the sources to show continuity and how one affected the other.
Other ideas? Yes, Kristen?
When you were sitting, working with the teachers visually.
Very good.
A
Yeah.
little notebook.
Hmm?
With a little notebook.
Yeah. One of the things is you want to get transitions. You don't want to watch 10 minutes of students working in groups. What you can do is do the lead-in and then end the clip with me helping them in a group. Or you could open up with them working in groups and then move to the full class discussion. One of the things I recommend is you capture transitions from one part of the lesson to another. And that, I think that shows you doing, and the students doing more than one thing. And that's one an important part of it. Other thoughts? Sharon, let me ask you, as you're a school administrator, what was your take on the lesson?
On the second lesson?
Both.
Well, the first one, the part that I actually loved the most was when you got everybody to sing with you, because kids love that. They like to be engaged, and whatever they were worrying about before, that sort of went away, and just about everybody in here was laughing in some way and got into the lesson. I thought that made a lot of sense. The order was great. You took in what the kids were interested in. I would have liked it all to show up in a Google form. I would have had it right there, so as kids were giving their answers, you could actually see those on the board, and that would have your discussion, and you wouldn't have to go home and take care of that tonight and type those things up. And then how you, I guess, we'll say, answer Doug's question by giving them really significant content about what actually took place. So I thought it was great.
Diane, you're an experienced teacher and field supervisor.
The lesson has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that's what I've always looked for, is the beginning, the middle, and the end. And, like Sharon said, I did like, and like you were pointing out, the transitions are so important. And the student involvement is so important. And 7th grade students, the goofier the better. So when you're singing, I was renowned for my singing. They love that though, because it's fun. They look at it as fun, and they're not embarrassed because, I'm singing, and let's be honest, I'm not that great. But I had enthusiasm, and that's the main thing. You have to have enthusiasm just like you did. And the transitions are so important, and then you got to bring it together at the end. And that's what we saw.
Thank you very much, everybody. A round of applause for our